What's up, everyone? Jim, Terry, Joshua here with Keeping It Real, an X-Men Apocalypse Spoilercast. Yes, full spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen X-Men Apocalypse, come back and watch this when you have. We're going to talk everything that we liked and didn't like about the movie in full spoilers detail. And about partway through this, we're going to work in an interview I did a few months ago with Jubilee actress Lana Condor. She came in here before much of the marketing of the movie had been released. And she's not going to end up being in X-Men Apocalypse. We've all seen the movie, obviously.
She has more screen time in this interview than she does in the movie.
She literally does have more screen time talking to me about the movie than she has in the movie. So a lot of her stuff was cut. Bryan Singer has acknowledged that. So we're going to get into talking about that, and we're going to show and play you the footage of highlights of it, of me talking with her about what she did shoot, and it's going to be interesting because it's not in the movie anymore. So, but without further ado, again, full spoilers ahead for X-Men Apocalypse. Let's just get quick reaction since the UK reviewed the movie for us. Terry, let's start with you. What did you think of X-Men Apocalypse?
The thing that worked the least for me about this movie was Apocalypse himself. His whole quest just is something that we've done before, in like so many other superhero movies. Nothing really about the look of Apocalypse worked for me. I didn't like the character's motivations. I love Oscar Isaac. I came out of this, my boyfriend said, wait, Oscar Isaac was in this movie? I was like, yeah, he was the villain. Like,
name check boyfriend.
But the fact that like someone can watch this entire movie and not realize it's him, it's probably good for his career, but like not great when you have an actor as wonderful as him. That being said, like, I really like this generation of the X-Men. Even if I don't love the movie, I love seeing these characters interact, and I really loved what Sophie Turner did with Jean Grey. I was surprised that this movie was as much her movie as it was, and I'm really excited to see if they're spinning off and doing some like New Mutant stuff, if they bring those characters over there or anything like that.
We're going to talk about the new characters in a little bit in even more detail, spoilers detail. Joshua, what did you think of X-Men Apocalypse?
I was super disappointed in this movie. I'm a huge X-Men fan. I thought the last one, Days of Future Past, was amazing. Huge fan of First Class as well. So I was really ready for like the big ending to this trilogy of like the prequel trilogy, and it just disappointed in so many ways. There were a couple great moments here and there, but overall, just not a great movie. Like you were saying, the villain didn't really do it for me. Even the visual effects, which are usually spot on, were a little like spotty this time. And there's this one particular scene where they're all up on like a rock. It's clearly like a green screen. It's supposed to be like a mountain or something. It's pretty bad. There's so many characters that they kind of don't know who to prioritize, and because of that, a lot of them feel shortchanged. Even like main characters, like Mystique. She's like the kind of the face of the movie and all the promotions, that she was a huge part. Her, along with Charles, Eric, and Beast, were sort of like the main core from the first one, second one, but this one, they're lost in the hubbub of this being such this giant X-Men movie, introducing so many characters. All the Horsemen were awful. They just stood around Apocalypse the entire time, super generic. The plot itself felt very generic.
No actual horses either.
Yeah, gosh. What the heck? So yeah, it's just things just like misfiring one thing after another. The humor, which Days of Future Past, actually a surprisingly funny movie, right? This, even when they were trying to like do jokes, they didn't really hit. Yeah. Even the Wolverine thing, which most people would like want to get excited about.
We're going to talk about that in further detail in a little bit.
So just overall, I was pretty disappointed in this. I thought it was okay at best, which is not what I want out of an X-Men movie.
They're steamrolling over all my talking points, just so you guys know. Now for my thoughts on the picture. I think it went in one ear, not the other with me, like, most of our podcasts do for you. I'm just kidding. I thought, in the moment of watching it, I'm like, this is okay filler. I don't really care about anything going on, except I did like the young kids that they, Ty Sheridan's Cyclops. I like Sophie Turner's Jean Grey. I really like Cody Smith McPhee's Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
And I did like the Quicksilver sequence again. And then there was a couple of key like dramatic scenes with Magneto that I really liked. But overall, I just thought the movie was Much Ado About Nothing, and which, when it's about the end of the world, you would think it would have more impact. But I think that the fact that you didn't really get to spend enough time and really feel as invested in these characters, you didn't feel like they were necessarily in danger. Even Mystique, even Jean Grey, or Xavier, and he's the one probably in the most mortal peril throughout the movie. It's interesting. Each X-Men movie, they have to figure out a way to neutralize Xavier
or horribly weaponize him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now let's we want to actually hear your guys' thoughts on it. So let us know in the comments, generally on the movie. But now we're going to get into more specific areas of the movie. Let's talk about a little more detail about Apocalypse himself. Now, Oscar Isaac has been a guy that we've been talking about a lot now in the last few years. Why do you think he did this movie? I mean, he didn't really need to. He's in Star Wars.
I think on paper, it seems like an awesome role. Yeah. It shows he's not just the hero. Yeah. It shows he can play a villain. You aren't, putting him in a box. But just the execution, nothing about it landed to me. And I mean, you're talking about some of the scenes that he's in, like his four horsemen.
In Star Wars, he'll get his four horsemen.
Yeah, I can't wait till he gets his horsemen in Star Wars. No, but his four horsemen just seem like really haphazardly chosen. It's like the first four mutants he finds. And he's like, oh, all right.
It's taken us longer to hire somebody here at IGN. He was like, you got powers? You'll do.
But even Magneto seems to be the person who he's most invested in. And the second Magneto joins with Apocalypse, it just kills his arc. You're right. He had some really interesting stuff at the beginning, and then that was it. So it was really disappointing to me. And again, Oscar is such a great actor, and none of it came across here. Maybe it was just being hidden under the weight of that terrible costume or the makeup, just pulling his face down like this. It was really frustrating actually when I was watching it.
I think he signed on for X-Men before he signed on for Star Wars. So he was just sort of coming up. He had just done Inside Llewyn Davis. He had done Ex Machina, where he's the bad guy in that too. Inside Llewyn Davis, he was the protagonist, but he was very unlikable. He was a jerk. So I actually thought that Apocalypse was a good fit for him because he was doing the villain thing. And I was actually surprised when he was Poe Dameron, because I was like, what? He's a good guy? I was actually convinced. I had this theory going that his Poe Dameron character was going to turn and be a bad guy.
Got 2 more movies,
dude.
It
could still happen. But no, that was actually a surprise. But so he actually knows how to play a really good villain. He's an incredible actor, as we've seen. But it was like too much of what makes him great was obscured by sort of the clunky costume and the really bad makeup. I'm sorry.
Let's talk about that.
I wanted to give that look, that makeup, a chance. I know it first came out and it looked like Ivan Ooze and everything, and he did, but then they showed that he was actually blue and he wasn't, pink, purple, and so I was like, okay, I can do this. And then all the pictures came out and he didn't look that great. A bust was revealed from a company that tried, made a bid, like a pitch to do the effects for X-Men Apocalypse, and it looked spot on, like bald, white eyes, blue lines. It looked intense. It looked great. And then for some reason they didn't get the job, right? And they went with what we saw. And I kind of get it. I see the merger of this technology and his armor into his look and everything, and it's sort of melding with his forehead up there. I get what they're going for. It did not look good. So every time he appears on screen, it's kind of like this ugly villain. And even then, just all his sort of like grandiose speaking about the strong must survive and all that. It didn't really hit. They needed to bring him down.
What was his real agenda? Actually, he wanted to destroy mankind, but he gets rid of all the nukes. So he wants the Earth back, and I guess he wants the mutants to inherit the Earth, but yet he seems willing to pretty much kill anybody. So I don't really get what his shtick is.
I think it was ideally, at least from the comics, is he wants only the strong to survive. And I think maybe there was one line in the movie where he was like, human or mutant, the strong will survive. And so but again, he's spent so much time posturing that it's hard to really tap into what he personally wants. I'm actually surprised they didn't have him have a reincarnated mutant who reminded me of his first love or something. It was no, he was a big view villain, and those are usually the worst.
And you're talking about this being the end of a trilogy, which this didn't feel like a capstone to me. It didn't feel like a period that would lead. I feel like we still have a lot more movies to go until we get to the first X-Men movie, which none of the chronology makes sense in these movies anyway, but seemingly that's where we'd end up. But it's true, in a movie that we know that so many of these characters will survive to be characters later, having a villain whose threat is the end of the world and I'm going to kill all you just really doesn't lack any weight. And we see these other movies.
You mean it lacks weight?
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you. But we see movies like Civil War, which again, it took Marvel a lot of movies to get to this point, but the conflict is so personal where there are stakes because you're like, okay, someone isn't trying to destroy the world, but someone is trying to destroy the Avengers, and that's something that I'm invested in because I want them to stay together. And even in Batman v Superman, there was a certain element of that where, yes, it was the end of the world element with Doomsday, but there also was like Batman fighting Superman when you want these two characters to work side by side. And so having Apocalypse be the threat and no real underlying conflict
or interaction with them.
Yeah, it was just really frustrating. And you talk about it going in one ear and out the other. Like, we've now seen this a couple weeks ago. Before we did the Spoilercast, I didn't think about the movie again after we watched it. And that's a bad thing, right? You want that to stay in your mind. You want to be like, what are they going to do next?
You said two very important things. Actually, the first thing you said that was really funny is that this movie makes BVS look good.
Yeah, right?
But the second thing is that we are invested in the Avengers because we've seen that team, we've been there, we've seen them form, we've seen them change, but we understand that core cast of characters. In this movie, there was no core team. There was they kind of had these little splinter groups here and there, but going into it, everyone was, they were just students at a school, and Mystique was off doing her own thing, so there wasn't like a team of X-Men. And at the very end, we do get a team.
The X-Men weren't united.
They were not. And at the end, when we get that team at the end, it almost feels a little hollow, as it's just like the money shot, but they didn't quite earn it. So I'm like, why is Storm there? I don't know. Like, what's her good reason for joining up?
Yeah,
she seemed cool, and she's going to be Halle Berry eventually.
Yeah, I think this would have played better with the original casts. I mean, those moments in Days of Future Past that were apocalyptic worked because it's McKellen and Stewart essentially dying. And Halle Berry and Jackman, and you're invested because you've had essentially 15 years with these characters. It's an interesting point about you're trying to. It's like you're trading on the nostalgia of other actors, but with this new rebooted iteration, and it didn't really work. Although let's talk about some of the new characters. Again, Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, new versions of old characters. I like Sophie Turner as Jean Grey. I thought she was pretty good. She had the red hair and the giant shoulder pads of the 80s. And I will say this movie didn't go 80s enough, but we can talk about that in a little bit. And then I was also surprisingly really liked Ty Sheridan's Cyclops.
I really liked him a lot as well. He really worked for me, and it's interesting you talk about how there's no core group because everyone's splintered off. I wish they'd just chosen a group of X-Men to follow. Like, this could have been a really cool movie if it was told.
Kids.
Yeah, if it was told from the kids' point of view, and you have Magneto and Professor X and Mystique off on the sidelines, and if you had just trimmed it down, you could have included the mall scene, and you could have had them having to rescue them and save the day, which they ultimately do. And now I really want to see that version of the movie. I've just convinced myself.
It could have been like Giant Size X-Men #1, where the old crew basically are in peril, and this new group has to come in and rescue them. I would have loved to have followed the kids, and to tie in with your comment about the 80s, that it wasn't 80s enough, I agree with you. I mean, as somebody who grew up in the 80s, and the prospect of nuclear war was very real. I remember as a little kid writing a letter to President Reagan because it was a class assignment, and I'm like, please make sure we don't all get nuked.
He's like, I'll do that.
He's like,
because you asked. Because you asked, I'll do that.
Yeah,
look up.
Sophie Turner
would have liked that.
Killed it as Jean Grey. I was all that. That's when in the beginning when I said there's a couple great moments. All the great moments were hers.
Yes.
Her relationship with Cyclops was really good. He was a little slow to start, but once he met up with her, I felt that chemistry. I was really into what their characters were doing. I kind of sat up a little bit whenever they were off doing their adventures or fighting together. I thought that was really great. She just has. I think there was from Game of Thrones. People were worried is she gonna be able to be Jean Grey and be empowering and stuff? It's yes, she's an actress. She was acting kind of timid and naive on Game of Thrones. Now she's acting very well in X-Men Apocalypse. as Jean Grey, of just this person who understands that they're like have this deep power that they don't know how to control, but are still very strong despite that. I thought that was great, and her arc at the end, despite the fact that they kept cutting back to her, going like this,
yeah, a bit too many flinching,
you know, during
that
that final scene. But when she comes up as the Phoenix, I felt, even though that's a huge thing to just put in the movie, it wasn't like built up like perfectly. I still thought it was a great moment for her character to finally like embrace that power.
Where do you go from there, though, since you already have her in her first thing? Well, yeah, they did. Bryan Singer did say that the next one will have cosmic elements, but was it kind of too much too soon? Did you kind of peak by putting in Phoenix right off the bat in her first? Even the original movies, they earned that a little more.
Yeah.
They screwed it up ultimately,
Yep.
but
I feel like Bryan Singer as a director felt like he already kind of built up to it, and then he wasn't going to go through like another couple movies being like, oh, let's put the fire in her eyes and let's like have her, be fighting to struggle to contain her power. I feel like he really just wanted to put it out there. And in a way, I feel like a lot of things in this movie were just like, the fans want this, let's give it to them. And I think that was a big thing that the fans have been like, pretty much like harassing him for. Like, we want the Phoenix, we wanted your Phoenix, and now we got it. Like I was saying before, it wasn't quite, perfectly set up, but I did feel like it was a good moment for her character, and we can take that moment and use it as a launching pad, hopefully for the sequel, which I'm hoping will be the Dark Phoenix saga.
Well, I think that you're right, that there have been so many X-Men movies and a handful with Jean Grey that I feel like this has been built up to. If you've even watched most of them, you have a general idea of what this is. I don't want to wait another 3 movies to get that payoff from her. I think it's really cool. And then the big challenge is, well, what do you do to keep her interesting when you have that big, oh my God moment? And how do you not have her just revert back to that whenever you need it?
I just don't know if they should do Dark Phoenix again. They tried it, they did it in the movie. The X-Men movies haven't retold the same story yet, even with the reset timeline. I don't know how you do it without Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. He's such kind of a key component.
The Wolverine thing in this, I don't know. That scene didn't really work for me, especially since Bryan Singer
just to pick up on that, the movie made Wolverine a big part of it, but in the comic book, it's actually a very intimate, like, love story and very strong story for Jean and Cyclops. Like, Cyclops is the one who's like out for her and trying to help her deal with this, and then when she becomes Dark Phoenix, he has to like bring her back. And then she turns into like regular Phoenix, and they're like on the moon, and they're fighting the Shi'ar together, and they make their last stand together. And she's like, "Scott, I love you," and then she kills herself to end the Phoenix right there. And it's this great love story between them. So I think because they have so much chemistry in this movie, that's a perfect thing for them to do next time. And this is actually, I think the average moviegoer will not realize that this is the Dark Phoenix story again if you put it on the moon and you go into space with like the Shi'ar, and the fact that it was just a big fiery bird. We didn't get that in X-Men The Last Stand. She just had like really bad cataracts and was standing around in a red costume. So I feel like they've set up, they've built all the setup for what they would need to do the Dark Phoenix saga.
The Shi'ar thing is interesting because, that way you could get, that's one way to write Professor X out of the series, is you have him, he, in the comics he went off with the Queen, what was her name, Lilandra or something? Yeah. And, went off into space, could walk again, everything. And then Magneto kind of took over the school for a while too, and some different storylines. But, I think it would be interesting if you wanted to continue the series and just switch things up. That's one way you could do it. And then also there are also the Brood, which is very much like Aliens kind of ripoff.
Yep.
And then there was Cyclops and Havoc's real dad turned out to be Corsair, the space pirate with the Starjammers. So they could kind of do their own version of Guardians of the Galaxy too with those characters,
I think that would be great. Just choose a core X-Men team of like the new kids, leave the other people out, and I'm sure they probably won't even show up because their contracts are up. And then just, go into space and have a good, cosmic adventure with the X-Men.
Well, I do want to say, speaking of the new kids, we talked about 2 of them, but I will say new Nightcrawler totally worked for me. He was really great.
Cool.
Also, not really a new kid, but bringing Quicksilver into that group really, really, really worked for me. I loved the dynamic of that foursome. Poor Jubilee not being a part of it, as we'll talk about it later.
We will get to that, but I want to ask you about Quicksilver. What did you think of that end decision of him building up like, oh, Magneto's my dad? They revealed it in a clip or a trailer that, it's his dad. And for him at the end to not just tell his father, I'm your kid, like, how did you feel about that? I thought that was kind of a cop-out, like, especially when Magneto and Xavier are like, Magneto's like, I have no family left, and Xavier's like, well, your family,
Well, you gotta have a reason to bring him back later. I didn't think it was a cop-out, honestly. I'm like, I don't know, they've been building up to it for 2 movies. It's not the main storyline. I think that's okay, a thing to save and say, hey, obviously, well, they might come back to it later, or they might never.
Do you think he'll still be in his mom's basement in another 10 years? Will he actually go out in the world, get a job, do something?
You sort of get the sense that he really didn't leave the basement for the past 10 years.
Yeah,
he
he's
was just
been
down
playing
there
video games.
playing really fast.
It did seem really weird. So I'm with you there, Jim. It was like, why not have him tell him? Because the thing that set Magneto on this path to dark side, even darker than he has been before, like to be one of Apocalypse's horsemen, was that his family died. Yeah. So I thought his sort of revelation, the thing that would be wake him up and turn him back to the good side, would be him being like, hey, I'm your son. He's like, oh my God, I still have family out there. There's still a chance for me to have a family that I lost and be happy. But they didn't do that. I had no actually reason. I couldn't even tell you the movie's logic for not having him tell him.
I wonder if they shot 2 versions of it and they just ultimately went with the one that they felt like would open the door to bring them back, for another movie.
It seemed unnecessary for them not to do it. So I say thumb downs on that decision.
Thumbs down on that. Now, another new character was Angel, even though we had seen him in X3. So this makes the second time Angel's been on screen, and they kill him off at the end.
Is he dead?
He looked pretty dead to me. And they killed off Havoc, but you didn't see the body of Havoc either.
That's true. That was weird.
I got the sense and didn't they said that they cut out the scene where Scott sort of deals with it because Brian said he thought it was...
That would be too much character development?
He was like, it's a great scene, but then it slows down the movie, and I wanted a tighter movie, and I'm just like, okay,
wow.
You're the director.
Okay, I don't know. Funny story, I visited the set, and when he goes over to that big crater, and he sees that Havoc is dead, he originally took off his glasses and was like, no, and this big beam goes into the sky, and everyone's like,
So how many planes did he take out doing that? Like, blow up the space station?
But in the movie, they made it a more quiet moment with Sophie Turner, so I thought that was actually a lot better. But yeah, so that was, by the way, I was hanging on to that spoiler that he died for like 9 months. I didn't tell anybody.
Good work.
What did you think of how they handled Angel?
Oh, it was awful. They didn't develop him. He was just like a cage fighter. Like, okay. And I mean, to be honest, he was never that interesting in the comics. He's probably the least interesting of them, which is why he got really awesome when he became Archangel. Yeah. The design for his Archangel thing wasn't as cool as it should have been. I think he was actually a victim of the fact that this movie was in 3D and seems like a little late to the party, although it is making a big box office. So clearly, some people are still there's still a demand for that. But yeah, just him like shooting knives at the camera and just fight. It's like, I feel like just Apocalypse liked him because he was an angel, and that's like religious imagery that he likes.
What did you think of Apocalypse carving time out with his end of the world plans? Make sure everyone got a makeover. Everyone, Magneto kind of just went with the stubble, kind of proto Don Johnson.
And like that actual scene where he's like,
he's like giving him like a haircut.
I guess like Professor X is like paralyzed, so he's not going anywhere, so he has time to do this. Yeah, I mean, like my one thought about Angel is I was like, well, I think he had my least favorite makeover of all of them. Like again, this goes back to why did Apocalypse really choose these people? Like, are they the best choices? I don't know. It left very little impact on me. I thought of the 4 of them, Storm was the most interesting.
Yeah. Do you like her bit with Mystique being kind of like her hero?
Yeah, I really did, and I thought that had good payoff later too, where she was like, wait, why am I fighting against the person who I want to be? This doesn't make any sense. Am I on the wrong side of this? Like, she hasn't had a mentor before. That's actually some interesting story and character development and treatment. Angel got
You got nothing.
You got nothing.
Poor
No,
guy.
he
And
really was.
Psylocke too.
He actually.
Oh, poor Psylocke.
Well, let's talk about this because I want to pose a question to you guys.
Okay.
Between Jubilee and Psylocke have actually appeared in multiple X-Men movies. Jubilee has been in several of them. Lana Condor plays her in American Apocalypse. I'm thinking about the election. X-Men Apocalypse, and Olivia Munn plays Psylocke. Now, this is not. I wouldn't fault the actresses for this, but why, with multiple appearances of these characters, why have the X-Men movies not been able to get either Psylocke or Jubilee right? Joshua, what are your thoughts on all that?
I feel like they're just so invested in the main cast, the most iconic cast, which is Cyclops, Jean, Wolverine, Magneto, Professor X. Like they really want to trade on those names because if you're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a movie, you want to use the safe bets. That said, it seems really weird not to use these other characters that have been huge hits in the comic books. And Jubilee, she's like the gateway character, right? You should put her like front and center in these movies. Not to mention the fact that she is an Asian American character. There's not a lot of those on screen, and it's a lot to even get them in the movies, and then so to cast them in the movie, make it seem like they're gonna have a part, and then take it away. Same thing with Psylocke, although her story is really weird because she was a white woman, like an English woman, who was put in the body of a Japanese ninja, which is really weird.
Unless we get Olivia Munn.
Yeah, that's we get Olivia Munn.
So they split the difference and get an Asian American.
Yeah, it's just so it's really weird. It's just sad for these minority characters to be cast in these movies and be given such little roles and to be not adapted faithfully from the comic books. Like they were essentially just like Jubilee was just there for what, a line.
Well, she never says her name.
Yes.
You never see her use her powers. She never says her name. You have no idea who she is. It's
she
the fact that
for the end of the movie.
She naps throughout most of the movie on the lawn, she was stoned at a concert or something. If it wasn't for the fact that she was the wearing a yellow jacket and was the sole Asian. Psylocke's in there. You probably wouldn't remember her, but they cut out the mall sequence where that could have developed their characters, maybe added some to the camaraderie and the humor of the whole piece. And then Psylocke is just a straight-up villain. Even at the end, the little way she's skulking off.
Yeah. Are they building her up to be something else? Because I don't care. Like she was completely one-dimensional in every way. And I mean, I think it was bad form a bit on Olivia Munn's part to come out and make the comments about how she didn't take the role of Vanessa in Daredevil because she didn't want to be a love Deadpool. God, I'm just like mixing all my names
There is
up.
a Vanessa in Daredevil. Vanessa Fisk.
In Deadpool, because she didn't just want to be a love interest. And first of all, that's a little bit tacky to come out and say that. It's wait 20 years, but also then you see those two movies side by side, and it's like Vanessa is the part, that's the one who actually is a character.
And an arc.
But I think you're right. I think you're right about the fact that these movies are repeatedly only invested in 5 or 6 X-Men that they consider to be the moneymakers because those are the ones who were in the first movie. And to build up these characters and do them justice, you need to invest time in them. And the fact that we know so much of at least Jubilee's material, but maybe some of Psylocke's too, was cut from the movie. It's clear that they're not willing to take a risk on new X-Men and expand the core cast.
Yeah, she would have been great if for an X-Force movie or something. Give her a proper, fully developed character. Although I will take issue with you on not wanting to be a love interest.
Well, I think on paper, yes, but now you see those movies and you
that
realize...
wasn't her fault that they didn't give her a good part. I thought for what they gave her, she showed up, she did what she had to do. I thought she looked great in her action scenes and what they did with her powers.
But is that the character to you? Huh? Did they get the spirit of Psylocke right?
No. They did not. But I don't blame her for that. And I say that's great that you're here as this powerful, deadly force in this movie and not a girlfriend, because that is 90% of the roles for lead women are to be the girlfriend or the one who gets saved. And she was there kicking butt, and she looked like she had a vendetta in the end. So even though that's not faithful to the comic book, I feel like that, and I feel like it wasn't her fault.
But couldn't they just have named her any other
Well, then you get Lady
mutant
Deathstrike,
character.
which is even like worse. They like butchered that character horribly.
Yeah.
And again, this is just not having enough time and space to devote to these characters, but the need to put them in to, I don't know, satisfy the fandom.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that brings us to the.
Well, I did quickly want to say so, the Deadpool thing. I totally agree with you about the fact that on paper it's obviously you want to be the superhero or supervillain and not just a love interest and damsel in distress. My point was simply that now, since she put that out in the world, you look at those two characters and you see which was a more richly drawn character, and
Okay,
it almost does
there.
seem
Yeah.
like she made the wrong choice, because Vanessa would have given her a lot more to do than she got in this role. I also, going back to the makeover thing, because I'm never going to not find that, I'm never going to not find that funny. It's clear that like Apocalypse has the same worldview fashion sense that he did from way in the past, because God is that like, I'm like, you're a sexist, sir. Like, give her some pants.
You get pants, you get pants, you get a cape. Let's see your fanny. Like that was kind of like what it
Let's
came
see
down.
your fanny.
But I like that we can like build that context. Well, yeah, he's from ancient Egypt. That's what the ladies would have worn.
Now, what do you think it takes then to get a faithful Jubilee or Psylocke movie? Do you think they'll just recast those roles again for a future movie? Do you think should they pop up in maybe the New Mutants movie that we know is happening?
Well, I feel like the New Mutants, you want to service the New Mutants, right? Although there's the rumor that Storm could be either in that movie or make a cameo. It's a little unclear right now. So I think you might want to have one or two familiar faces, but then the rest you want to, because those are other characters, like Magic and Wolfsbane. Like you want to see those characters get their time and not have to share it with other characters who are never part of it. Just because you want to like use a pre-established character. That said, I feel like for New Mutants, you do the New Mutants, but there are places where these characters can be used. I feel like in the next X-Men movie, I feel like Jubilee there'll be less characters in it, so Jubilee could have a role there, like an actual role.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I feel like Psylocke would be a good fit for X-Force.
Yeah. I have a question back to you with that though. Like, if you're talking about they've tried to do these characters a few times and they haven't really nailed them any time, I don't mean to break this to you guys, but there are a lot of X-Men. At what point do you just say, okay, we're just going to pass on Psylocke and Jubilee
I think the reason why those characters keep popping up is, one, the visual look, but two, generationally they appeal to the folks like, frankly, you guys who would have grown up with those characters from the cartoons and the comics. And they are some of the more notable female X-Men characters. So I feel like they're at least worth trying one more time to get them right. I just don't know. I agree with you, Joshua. I feel like until they can actually, maybe, once Hugh Jackman is finally actually retired from it and they have nowhere to go but bank on new people, maybe we won't actually get those kind of definitive portraits of them. But we want to know from you guys, were you disappointed with Psylocke and what the hell is that? Jubilee.
You can't even remember. She didn't leave an
Exactly.
impact.
Well, she didn't say her name. How am I supposed to remember? So, were you disappointed with Jubilee and Psylocke in X-Men Apocalypse? What have you been disappointed with? Sort of the way they've never been done, right? Let us know in the comments. Now, before you talk about more of X-Men Apocalypse, since we have been talking about Psylocke so much, we're going to segue now to my interview with her from a few months ago.
Jubilee. You really keep forgetting Jubilee. You said Psylocke.
I did. She was on.
I was like, when did you talk to Olivia Munn?
Sorry about that. Jubilee actress Lana Condor a few months ago, and she sat right here, people, and we spoke at length about what she could say about the movie, but there were definitely scenes that she shot that were cut. She talks to me about her powers, what they would look like. She talked to me about sort of, we'll get my backstory. She talked about going to the mall scene, none of which is in the movie. And then also she kind of talks about which character she bonded with the most and just sort of her experience. Now Lana Condor has not really done much of anything before this. This really is her big break. She's very young, and you'll see from watching the interview that this is a person who's not yet really been kind of media trained, like, knows the exact same sort of soundbite. So it's kind of refreshing just to get this young person coming up with this big role, talking about it, and who's not jaded by the industry. So hopefully she takes getting kind of cut from a good chunk of her role getting cut from the movie in stride, and maybe there'll be some stuff on the Blu-ray or DVD. Bryan Singer said there's not going to be like a rogue cut of this.
But he did say that those deleted scenes, the Jubilee stuff, would end up on there. And after all the hype around them all, I want to see it as the short film it will end up being.
Exactly. All right, so we're going to play for you now highlights of my interview with Lana Condor, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about more of the movie. So stay tuned and watch me talk to Lana Condor, the actress who plays Jubilee in X-Men Apocalypse. But Jubilee is a character who is, given how long X-Men's been around, it sounds weird to say a character that's been around for over 20 years is relatively new to the mythos, but given that it's a 50-something-year-old franchise now, she's relatively new. Yeah. She is then kind of representing this new sort of era of X-Men in the movie, along with younger versions of characters we've already seen. Tell us a little bit about her role in the team and sort of which maybe characters she bonds with the most and that kind of thing.
So as you know, they're bringing in kind of like a younger mutant generation thing. So she hangs out with, through the majority of the film, Jean Grey, Scott, and Nightcrawler. Yeah. So we're all like pretty good friends. I've been at the mansion the longest out of them, which is funny because she's new to the thing. But and I guess what I can tell you is that we are all very close and we spend a lot of time together. And I think her role in terms of in that friend group is she's very confident in kind of her, I would say kind of her powers and who she is. And just like in the comics, I don't think she's ever had many insecurities. She's kind of like a badass and that's just who she is. And but she offers good comedic little intervals, and she's super, super smart, so. Yeah. Duh.
Now,
and she's closest to Jean Grey, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she, in the comics, I didn't, how much of the movie will get into this, but in the comics, she's an orphan, her parents were murdered, and she was a mall rat.
Comics.
You did?
Boom.
Did you have any particular favorites of those?
I can't remember any of the names, but there's one, I think it's super, super classic, but it's one where she's just spends all of her time running away from the policeman in the mall, and then she jumps through a portal wall thing, and then she's with Wolverine and the weird things.
Yeah. Are we going to get any of that kind of backstory in the movie? Do we see her or know about her being a mall rat or an orphan, anything like that?
Yeah. I would say so, yeah.
Okay. Now, the powers that she has are visually they're very fun. Did they give you any sense of what it would look like, or did you just have to go there and do your thing? And did it ever feel kind of silly to, trying to do all that? Or did you know, okay, when you do this, it's going to look like that? How much did they actually guide you in?
I think I never felt really silly because everyone else was they were all but going into it, I just figured okay, I have a certain way that I'm going to do it, but visually, I haven't seen it yet at all, so I couldn't tell you exactly what it's like. But what one of the producers did say was, it's going to look more like in Days of Future Past when Kitty Pryde is holding Wolverine like this, when he's on his thing. Yeah. It's going to look more like that. Okay. Power that's kind of streaming from her hands. Okay. We'll see. It was kind of cool. They strapped kind of wires and then LED lights to the palms of my hands. But every time that it would go, it would shock me. But I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to seem like, oh my God, like
So
a diva, you're hurting me. But it was like shocking, like actually.
So it's like when you go to the restaurant, your table's ready. They basically like strap those things to your hand, and it starts vibrating and lighting up, like basically like
yeah,
that. Okay.
but more like sharp pain.
Wow.
Yeah.
You might that might be an OSHA violation right there. I don't know. So yeah, tell us about working with them, like with Sophie and Ty. And now, did you also get many scenes with Storm, stuff like that? Alexandra Shipp's character.
Love her, by the way. So going into like my first day of work, I was super, super nervous because I had only met like Sophie, Ty, and Cody. Yeah, the first day of all of the shooting of X-Men, I was working. I was like freaking out, oh my gosh. And I had only met them one day before actually starting working. So it was like kind of like you had to bond really, really quickly. And it was really, really amazing and I learned so much from watching them work because they are my peers and we're around the same age. So it's really cool to see such successful young people and like kind of like their tricks of the trade and stuff like that. So it was really awesome, and it was easy to work with them because they're so good.
So it's like your graduate school then, basically, is doing this movie. You get to, yeah.
It was really awesome, and then I don't know how it's gonna look in the movie, but I didn't really work at all with Storm.
Oh, okay.
But then again, I think when we shot it, it was like in the beginning of the movie process, they had like kind of. We took all the good guys' takes in the beginning and towards the latter end of the movie.
Okay. So you could technically be in a scene with her, but you never met.
It's so crazy. And the script is like constant, at least what I felt was that it was constantly changing and like all this stuff was going on. So at the end of the day, like I'm sitting here trying to pretend like I know a lot about what's going to happen in X-Men Apocalypse, but really I'm like, oh no, things can change in like this. So.
Well, now this is, they're bringing in these fresh faces now for a new iteration of X-Men. If there was a follow-up, and I'm sure there will be because these movies print money, what would you like to see happen with Jubilee in a future iteration of X-Men?
I think it'd be really cool if she went into her vampire stage. I think that would be really cool. But I think just in terms of the little things, I would love for her to have a little bit more of a, if I was to be so blessed to be in another one, a little bit more of a character arc, like a meatier character arc.
Okay.
But it is an ensemble cast, and there's like, I don't know, 17 of us, and so the movie's like how long? Maybe 2 hours, and you have to fit everyone in. So. Yeah,
it's a hell of a juggling act. It's just.
Oh my gosh.
Was there a particular kind of day, or you kind of spoke to this a little bit, but what was the moment where you're on set and you're like, oh my God, I'm part of a legacy now. You're part of the X-Men universe, like for good. Like when you're 60 years old, somebody will be, oh my God, you're Jubilee. Like somebody will have discovered that. At what point in making the movie did you really realize like I am part of this bigger thing here? This is huge.
Ooh, I'm still realizing that.
It'll hit you at the premiere, basically?
It'll probably hit me once I see it. But I think, what's a specific day? I don't know exactly what it's called, but we take like individual kind of power photos, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Where you go and then like you do your power and then
for the posters and all that stuff.
And stuff like that. And I think that was a really eye-opening, pivotal day for me because I realized like, oh, like people are gonna see this.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness.
I can't screw around. This is for real.
and everyone was dressed up, and everyone was. It was very cool, and I think I started realizing, oh well, now they're going to use images for promo and for stuff like that. So that means I'm actually.
You're suddenly going to be walking around Target one day. You're going to see you.
So it's so crazy. And then
are you getting an action figure? Do you know?
I hope so. They don't really tell us anything. I don't think they tell the actors really anything.
Right.
So we don't accidentally blab it out, which
Yeah,
I think is a good thing. But yeah, that would be really cool and really bizarre. But I think also another moment where it really hit me was at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Because we didn't actually 100% know that we were going to Comic-Con until maybe like a week in advance, because it was supposed to be a surprise.
Right.
But then, like, going on, they hired like a private jet, and so the whole cast was in a jet, and that to me was so crazy because I've never even flown first class before, and then there I am in this private jet with everyone, and I was sitting there like, what is happening?
What was it like working with Jennifer Lawrence?
Amazing, and because I'm a huge fan of hers, and I've watched all of her stuff, so it was very kind of, I don't know, I was a little starstruck. Yeah. But she will not break character ever.
Wow.
Ever.
That's a good J-Law, by the way, you just did. Yeah. Wow.
She'll like.
So she's intense for the whole
thing?
Yeah,
but it's like
intense.
Yeah, but like right before, she could be like la, 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 petting her dog or something like that, and then it's like, and then it's like, what?
Where do you go?
It's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And then working with Oscar Isaac and stuff. That's. I've met him and he's a cool dude, but I bet he's probably pretty intense too. Especially with a character like
Everyone's
that.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
He is amazing. I think he's perfect for Apocalypse. And it was interesting because when I watched Star Wars, the new Star Wars that came out, and he was in it, and he plays such like so far from different characters.
Yeah.
Because he plays this awesome, like super charismatic, kind of funny pilot, and then all of a sudden he's like this big, great person. But he's amazing and really intense, and I learned so much from everyone. Yeah. Everyone there.
So yeah, McAvoy and Fassbender too. They've got this sort of real chemistry now, doing these movies as Professor X and Magneto. What does Jubilee sort of think of the apocalypse and the horsemen and the sort of threat that they pose? Is she, this is, it's the end of the world, so she must be.
It's really, really scary. Yeah. And Jubilee, she, as confident as she is still only 16.
Yeah.
So I think when the threat of the end of the world lands on like a 16-year-old girl's shoulder, it can be pretty intense.
Had she, you said that she's been in the mansion for a long time. Has she actually been suiting up, going out on missions, or is this like her first time, like actually seeing combat?
I think this is her first time, really, kind of just seeing it and being involved with it. But I would say that she spent a lot of her time just learning in the mansion prior to.
That's kind of a bummer, though. Think about it. You're a mutant, and you have powers, and you're like, I still got to go to school, though. You still got to pass your math test. It's like, It kind of undercuts the whole thrill of being a mutant, where you're like, oh, I still got to get my degree. Okay.
Yeah. But I guess it does kind of like, what Professor X wants is, he wants equality and to be accepted into society like a regular, normal person. So I think in that sense, like regular, normal kids go to school. So we should go to school too.
And we're back from commercial. All right, so that was me talking to Lana Condor, Jubilee. What did you guys think about some of the things she had to say, particularly, just your thoughts on somebody who clearly thought she was going to have a much larger role in the movie. She talked about doing the photo shoot for her character and what her powers would look like, and she's not on the poster. I've seen no promo art of her.
Sad.
There's only like 2 or 3 photos even of her.
Yeah, it's because she was so excited, because you asked, like, how did you really know that this was, I've joined the X-Men franchise? And she goes, so when I did my hero poster, doing the pose and everything, and the poses, that poster is not out there. Yeah. We looked right before this. So another big thing that I just felt so bad, it's the way these movies are made, especially these bigger like blockbuster movies, these franchises, things get cut. People get cut. Roles get cut all the time. Robin, what was her name in BVS? She was.
Oh, Jenna Malone.
Jenna Malone was going to be in BVS, cut out. So that seems.
Batgirl, she was.
Batgirl. My bad. Sorry.
We lost Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane in
Yeah.
Amazing
Yeah,
Spider-Man
Amazing
2. Like
Spider-Man
this is not unprecedented.
Kevin Costner was cut out of The Big Chill. You do see his wrist though at one point.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard of for characters to be completely cut from movie or to have completely or roles like horribly reduced. But just the fact that she was electrocuted. She was electrocuted by the LEDs when she was using her powers, and she suffered through that and didn't tell anybody because she's like, no, I'm going to tough it out. I don't want to be seen like a needy actress who doesn't want to be electrocuted. I just thought she went through so much pain for this role, and to be cut is just like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Can you not feel bad for this girl?
Yeah, hopefully. I'm sorry.
I don't know. It really does make me wonder if it's going to be something that they try to build up into a bigger role later. If the reason why they reduced her is because they're like, it's just not working in this movie. Like, she's maybe just not clicking the right way or not bringing the right element. Like, there are a lot of reasons to be reduced or cut from a movie that's not just runtime, and part of it is like you don't work in this story. So, I mean, I hope for her sake that they save it for later. I hope for our sake that we get a great Jubilee later. But, I'm sure that Brian will come out eventually and explain why his decision making for why she wasn't in the movie, but maybe it just wasn't working ultimately.
It is a very stuffed movie with tons of characters already, so you can kind of see where they're forced to like trim the fat. And then if she was part of like a scene that was fun and cool, interesting, like the mall scene,
all the 80s stuff.
But you could see why that, while cool and fun, doesn't belong to the narrative and is not important to the narrative, so they cut it.
I just keep thinking like Robin Sparkles, let's go to the mall, everybody.
Well, I would have loved to see him because I think that levity could have helped the movie a little bit. It would have been a little bit more fun. Not that I like, completely light, comic book movies. I don't. I love the Nolan stuff, but I think if you're going to set your movie in the 80s, have a little fun with it. They had fun with the 70s and the 60s in the last two X-Men, and so there was a lot of stuff obviously cut. A lot of the Easter eggs that were teased via social media, I guess that's why they released it. Like the Dazzler album cover, that's not in the movie.
So much, like they just gave away so much. That
they gave away the ending by showing the team assembled at the end. They spoiled Storm. Blob surprise.
They spoiled Wolverine being in this movie. Like that could have been a really cool moment.
I mean, I thought that was fine because we all figured he was going to.
I genuinely was like, no, like whatever.
Well, given the teaser at the end of Days of Future Past that they didn't pick up on it anyway.
Yeah, let's talk about that. They didn't even pay that off.
I don't know. You're right. It's just like he wound up in Weapon X again, and Stryker had him. Yup. What was different this time? What did Mystique do with him? Maybe she had a plan. She's like, oh, he's heavy. This guy's made of metal. I'll leave him here for Stryker to find him. I don't know. But I will say another thing. Again, while we were on set, Bryan Singer, he was so excited. He was talking about how they had come up with, I think it was Nicholas Hoult who actually had the idea, who plays Beast, of just, he's like, what if, Cyclops, because he doesn't have full control of his powers, what if during the final scene, Jean grabs his head and uses him like a 50 cal, like a turret. And he's like, yeah, it's a great idea. So they did all this stuff, and there's even a teaser image that they released just a couple weeks ago of Jean holding his head and inspiring the blast. And I'm like, yes, that's going to make it in the movie. Movie comes, it's not in there.
Not in there. That would have been awesome. There were so many of these moments, and I'm really curious, why were things cut, and why did you choose to keep some of these things? I really felt like the movie didn't need Wolverine. I get commercially why it needed Wolverine, and ultimately why they spoiled that reveal in the trailer.
And also establishing his weird Jean Grey relationship.
Yeah, I mean, come on, she's only supposed to be like 18 in this movie.
Just goes to show that Sophie Turner has chemistry with anyone.
Well, I mean, I just found it creepy.
But it's weird.
Because
it is weird, but I'm like, good for you. You're a good actress. You can make it work.
I thought it was strange. And even Hugh Jackman, he's trying not to be like, even he looks kind of uncomfortable. Like, all right, someday I guess I'm going to have a thing for you. Snacks, I gotta run.
If you weren't uncomfortable, let us know in the comments.
To be honest, I was not that into that Wolverine. I thought it was a pale imitation of the X2 Berserker mode, which was so good, one of the best superhero action scenes we've ever got. And this was just kind of him doing that again. I did like to see seeing him in the cool Weapon X outfit, finally seeing that on screen. But aside from that, I was like, yeah, okay, all right.
I didn't think it looked that great.
Yeah.
I just like nothing about
it smelled
the hair,
it smelled like a reshoot or pickup shots or something.
Yeah, it just like I don't know.
Yeah, I
was
could see how it sounded good on paper. It's like, and then the kids find Wolverine in a pen, and they unleash him, and they use him to kill everybody so they can escape. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. But I just didn't have a great time in that.
Yeah, you saying that had me more excited than like the actual scene in the movie.
Let's see, what else did they cut? They also cut out, what's his face? Geez, I can't remember.
Well, I mean, even us talking about this, I think it's part of a bigger issue. You have these directors like Bryan Singer and Zack Snyder who like so want to excite fans on social media with these teases, and they're like, look at this awesome thing we're doing. But because of that, you're setting up expectations, and you don't know ultimately what you're going to cut. And I mean, you see it in a bunch of movies where you watch a trailer and there's this scene that you get really attached to, and then for whatever reason it's cut from the movie, and you're like, wait, where was it? But you're like, and where was that? Exactly. But you know, for directors to put so much out there and then like not deliver, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointing people.
Yeah.
Maybe people wouldn't have been as upset about, you know, missing certain elements if they hadn't known that they are there, they just weren't included.
Like, imagine if Singer had tweeted that Dazzler photo album.
It was Sophie Turner who
Sophie
who
Turner.
posted it.
If they had posted that, say, Sunday, after you'd seen the movie, you're like, oh, that would have been an awesome Easter egg or something like that. Because, you know, you're waiting for the 80s stuff. Those set photos had gotten out there, and, you know, they've been talking up the fact this is going to be an 80s movie and the Return of the Jedi stuff. Speaking of the Return of the Jedi thing, okay, what did you think about the jab about the third film? Because as other people have pointed out, including, I believe, our producer, Kyle, the Return of the Jedi is what started the whole idea of the third movie being the weakest one. So the kids talking about, there was no third movie, really, that you could have been griping about.
There was no other franchise with a third movie at that point.
I mean, James Bond movies didn't really count because they weren't, the idea of
we all
trilogies
know
didn't
that
work.
it's not
or
supposed to
didn't
really
do
make sense in the context of the movie.
Right.
It's supposed to be I think it works on twofold. It works because he's making a jab at X3, and then he's also making fun of what people will inevitably say about that, like, you know, like, oh, people will complain about this. I thought that was the intention.
Actually are, too.
Which, I mean, they are. Like, it also is sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy because you put that in someone's head and you walk out and you're like, wait, this really was the worst of the movie.
Yeah, he took a jab at X3, then he made another X3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this wasn't as bad as X3. This was okay. X3 was really bad, but still, it was the weakest of the trilogy.
Yeah,
Certainly,
and I think it was like poking fun too at like, oh, like people like to hate on the third movie, but I don't think the fact that like in context of Return of the Jedi coming out, this, that, and the other, I don't think that was the point. But we can make that argument against this movie.
What did you think of the way that they set up that mutants are supposedly more accepted in the world now? Did you, after the events of Days of Future Past, did you believe that? I mean, I thought Mystique
More
actually
accepted?
had.
I thought they were being hunted more.
No. It's by the 80s. Like, that's why cutting out the stuff from the mall. I mean, Nightcrawler's walking around as himself at the mall, and mutants are out there in the world. People know about the X-Mansion, and that, you know, the stuff cut from the mall included them going to an arcade where mutants had kind of become part of pop culture so much that they're in the video game. So there was like a mutant version of Pac-Man, a mutant version of these other classic kind of like Atari type games. And Dazzler, just the fact that she probably was an openly, you know, outed mutant pop star, probably, you know, but they cut all that.
I think that's part of why they cut it, because I definitely got the sense from the movie, and Joshua, correct me if you disagree, but I thought that, you know, mutants were still being persecuted and held down, and you know, they were accepted a little bit, but they also...
Well, Mystique had the line about, like, yeah, they're just more polite now, but they still don't like you.
Yeah, because I feel like in the beginning, and it shows you how they didn't really service this idea enough, that we're kind of confused about it. But in the beginning, they do kind of say that because of Mystique came out and pretty much exposed mutants to the world
And
earlier,
saved
the
Nixon
timeline,
and all that,
and saved the president.
That's
that kind of
true.
made
Okay, yeah.
like there's a positive, view of mutants now. So people were okay with mutants. But as we got into the movie, we saw that still wasn't true. You know, Stryker. You know, Mystique's comments and just
what
like
she's
cage
doing
fight.
now. Yeah, that's what I
thing,
mean.
yeah.
Like, her whole mission is to, like, protect mutants
she's
who are
like
still being
basically
taken
rescuing them from these like
Yeah.
underground things. Okay, let's talk about the sort of like the chicken wire electric fence thing that seems to sap any mutant's powers. If the world is, as a security measure, wouldn't they have that stuff on like every light pole in a major city just to make sure some mutant wouldn't go ballistic.
Are you talking about the cage match?
Well, like, no, the fact that they have almost like these EMP kind of things in like in
when they were in
Stryker's
prison?
cell. Yeah, and then in the cage match they had it too. So if that's all it takes to sap a mutant's powers, wouldn't they kind of have that at like every airport? Like it would be.
Well, I'll say this: two things. The cage match, I feel like it wasn't sapping their powers. It was just keeping Nightcrawler from zapping out or from teleporting out because it was disrupting his ability. I think that's what it was. And obviously Angel can't really get out because it would zap him. And then for Stryker's thing, he didn't know about mutants originally, but now when he found out about them, they developed technology. So 10 years later, they have a prison cell that could hold mutants.
Which is so weird because he was also played by a different actor, but he was in Wolverine movie, which is during Vietnam, and they knew about mutants enough that they had a mutant commando team.
Yeah.
It's so screwy, the whole thing. What did you guys think about the sort of the ending and the way that they... I think it's a little complicated the way he gave Moira McTaggart her memories back because... a lot of people were struck or bothered by the fact that he would wipe her memories to begin with, that it's violating her.
Right.
And then to like just give her memories back at the end. Why wait another 10 years if mutants have been accepted? Why not go to
Different
her
director.
73? I guess so. Well, what did you think too of the kind of the interweaving footage from First Class? It actually made me kind of sad because you don't see Magneto and Professor X together really until the very end. They have one kind of telepathic scene, but it just reminded me of how much I liked that movie more. Right. It's like every time they cut back to it.
Yeah, I will say this movie moved way too fast and it was overstuffed with a lot of stuff. And the thing that we lost in all of that was the fact that we did not get to see these world-class actors pretending to be our favorite comic book characters talking to each other. Just like Game of Thrones, I feel like season 6, I don't know why we're talking about Game of Thrones now. Season 6, I feel like is moving too fast and we're losing kind of those cool conversations between these really interesting characters. And I feel like the same thing about the X-Men movie. It's just that I want to see a good, juicy scene between Professor X and Magneto, but they didn't even share the screen, I don't think, until the end.
Until the end where they just did the same dialogue from the first movie.
Well, yes, but also I think this goes back to your earlier point where it's very unfocused. Like, if you're going to make this a movie about Professor X and Magneto and Mystique and the old guard of characters, if you will, then do that. If you're going to make it about the younger characters, do that, and you can get away with not necessarily having, Professor X and Magneto talking because it's from their perspective. But because it's sort of following all of them, you're right, it doesn't make sense, but also doesn't have time to do that. And it's frustrating as a viewer because you're right, those are like, that's the core relationship at the heart of this movie. That's really what everything was built on and why it's so interesting.
That's what
and
that
why
trilogy was found on.
I mean, both trilogies in a lot of ways. And so to have that be one of the things that's most lacking in this movie, yes, you've done it before, but it's still, it's what works.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
no, I totally agree
with
with you on that one, that it's surprising to me that on paper nobody would have thought about that, and just maybe they did. I'd like to know their
we've
reasoning
done it
for
before, and we're showing them that we've done it before. But it's like, yeah, you did it before. Do it more.
you're just reminding me that I like that movie better. Now, what did you think of sort of the, I didn't think the action set pieces were all that. I really wanted to see actually that danger room sequence at the end instead of it just ending with the Sentinels walking out. Like, that would have actually stolen the show for me. I didn't think the sequence, the climatic sequence with Magneto and the Horsemen and Apocalypse like destroying everything, I thought it looked pretty like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, this, in a lot of ways, the movie really felt like something that was made in 2006. Were there any action sequences that stood out to you? The only sequence to me that really stands out isn't necessarily an action sequence, but the Quicksilver Sweet Dreams
action,
sequence.
but that's...
And the dog eating pizza. Come on, he's adorable.
I actually didn't love the Quicksilver scene. I'm sure I loved it in the Days of Future Past, but here, it just from the beginning, like it starts. I like his intro, the music and everything, and there's like the kids in the car. Jubilee was in that car. And that's like
biggest moment.
Yeah, biggest moment. Slow motion car. So he shows up. he doesn't know that the mansion is exploding or under attack, yet he zooms up at super speed anyways, and then quickly he realizes what's happening. Meanwhile, me as the audience, I'm confused I thought Apocalypse was going to be the one who destroyed the mansion, but it was really an accident. He teleported it out of the way. Yeah, the Havoc made the jet explode. So already I'm just a little confused that I'm like, oh, well, this is really just an accident, not even caused by Apocalypse. And Quicksilver suddenly jumps into action and knows what to do, even though he wasn't aware it happened. And while he's doing it, I feel like every moment was a little too self-aware. Like Pizza Dog, as cute as that was. I know you love your dogs, Jim. Your little puppies.
Krupa's with me on this one.
But I apologize to Krupa then as well. But it was just like a little self-aware. It's like, oh, here's the Quicksilver scene, and here's like a funny thing we're gonna do. And like there's a girl, he like moves something, and then he like dances with her for a second, then moves her out. And I was like, this has become a little too self-aware. And like that he's kind of.
Do you think it robbed that sequence of tension?
Yeah, I thought it was a little confusing to start. I thought it wasn't as tense before. And just that it was a little too. I thought it was a little too quirky. Obviously, visually, it was an incredible feat. Again, on the set visit that I was on, Bryan Singer actually showed us footage, just the raw footage of them blowing up the X Mansion, and just all these cameras are running through it, and it was incredible. So from a technical point of view, it was masterfully done, and it was great. But just as far as like a story beat, I thought it was really weird. And then just going back to what you said before, just the fact that we didn't even see Havoc die was left as a very odd question mark to like, is he dead or not? Should I be sad now? So it was just a weird scene.
Would it at least explain then why they never mentioned Havoc in the other movies, or that Cyclops had a brother in the, he's been dead a long time.
I mean, I don't agree with you. I'm more with you. I think the Quicksilver scene really worked for me. I would believe that, he's running up and then he's like, oh crap, the mansion's exploding. I gotta go help out in whatever way I can. I was fine with being self-aware. The one thing that I am concerned about is, you're right, like I don't want it to be like, and now here's the Quicksilver scene in every movie and becomes a gimmick. I do think it's funny that, of everything that they're like, Marvel gets this, that, and the other right, it is Bryan Singer and Fox that gets Quicksilver more right than Marvel did. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it really worked for me. But you're right. There's no other action sequence that means
like
anything.
That whole. Okay, here's the other thing. Actually, before I get to that, one little note. As much as I love Pizza Dog, I don't think Frenchies were as popular in the '80s as they are now. I really feel like they're a more like. I don't think. Back then, you would have had a different type of dog up there. It would have been like the Spuds MacKenzie dog or something.
This is like when someone wrote an article about how it makes no sense for the main character in Fear the Walking Dead to be named Madison because it wasn't a popular name back then. Like, I'm like, whatever, it's Pizza Dog,
I remember those days. Now, actually, about the action sequences, I thought in the climactic moment of like, Magneto doing his thing, blowing up everything. I didn't buy his turn, first of all, to go back to the light. And also, I don't understand why Professor X keeps saying, I know there's good in you, Eric. And it's like, he just leveled San Francisco. How many times does this have to happen? Like, he sounds like, I don't mean this to come across the wrong way, but like people are in a relationship and they're like, I know I can change him. I know he's a good guy, and before you know it, it's like
that is sort of the core of their thing. It's why one never can fully defeat the other, but they are constantly at odds with each other. That being said,
like turn his ass into the police, even though they're like, oh, he helped out in the end. Yeah, after he leveled everything.
Yeah, the stuff with Magneto though at the beginning was so good with his family. Like I really thought that was powerful, and then
the dog tag execution.
Yeah, and then after that, like both his turn to join Apocalypse and his turn back to join the X-Men, I just thought were both paper thin and really honestly, like, did they run out of their time with Michael Fassbender because he was only like floating around moving
possibly
things for the rest of the movie?
Possibly because he did have Steve Jobs press tour and things like that, and he had Assassin's Creed actually too.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
possible
I just thought
maybe
that
they
his
didn't. Maybe they
arc
had
in the
to.
second 2/3 of the movie were.
Yeah, he just stood around.
Yeah, he was more like kind of catatonic. He was following the whims of Apocalypse, which we learned you don't do from X3 with Jean Grey. So.
Yeah.
I was a little. I mean, ultimately, I got why it was included, but I have to say, I thought it was a little. At first, I found it a little distasteful, the Auschwitz sequence. because
this is the thing we have to do in every single X-Men movie.
well, yeah,
it
it's like Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed each time. But I just thought the idea that, I don't know, I'm going to get probably torn apart for this, but I thought I get thematically why it's like, okay, we're going to destroy, like, this is a symbol of the worst atrocities mankind could commit, so we're going to destroy it. But I'm thinking of it almost from a historical perspective of like, that's it's a sacred kind of thing. So destroying it in a comic book movie kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know.
I read that scene as Apocalypse bringing Eric back to the place like where his pain was born.
Yeah.
And wanted to remind him of why, like, what set him on the path to become Magneto in the first place. And he's like, forget like laying down roots and having a family. Like, I need you to remember this pain so you can be my weapon and be my horseman.
Even though he's already in pain because he just lost everything.
That's why he needs to be the most powerful
We're
horseman,
double
and the only
the
one
pain.
that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was very symbolic for him to give him the power to literally destroy that site, to destroy Auschwitz.
I guess, yeah.
And that would probably speak a lot to Magneto. He's like, if I can destroy an awful place like this, even though it's turned into a memorial now, at the time, to him, it's probably a real fresh wound.
Yeah.
Like, if I can have the power to destroy this, where normally I could just lift things and catch bullets, but now I can destroy on a larger scale. Like, I meant to do more for Apocalypse.
All right. Well, I think we're about to wrap up our thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse and then touch base on some of the week's other news real quick. Overall, no, you didn't like the movie. You wouldn't recommend it.
I would not recommend it unless you're just like a hardcore X-Men fan. You want to see these guys on the big screen, but it's again lacking the characterization that we love so much about them, and it was just overstuffed. Not enough. The characters that you do like aren't serviced enough. So it was just like okay at best, but it was just ultimately it's a big disappointment coming from an X-Men fan.
Terri?
Yeah, to me, it was just like unbearably average. There was nothing special about it. It feels like it was a movie that would have been made 10 years ago, and it frustrates me when we see all these great moves forward in other realms of comic book adaptations that this one just feels so stuck in the past. And like, I mean, I think you can go and sit and watch it and you'll find things to enjoy, but ultimately it's one of those movies that the more it sits with me, the more issues I have with it, and it's not anything that I have any massive, push to want to go back and watch again.
Yeah, I wish I had liked it more. I was definitely stoked to, when they announced the movie and everything, but nothing ever surprised me. Each trailer that came out had a sameness to it that is reflected in the movie. I felt like the trailers, I felt like I'd seen all the biggest bits except for the Quicksilver thing in Pizza Dog. But I think ultimately it's, unless you're a big X-Men fan, I agree with you on this one, Joshua, like you could probably skip it, wait till Blu-ray or something.
Yeah.
But it's just a shame because, the X-Men movies were before the Spider-Man movies. They started the current craze. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the early 50s rock and roll guys who started everything. But by the time you get to like the late 60s to 70s, like they're almost a caricature of themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what reminds me of here. Now the movie is still going to probably open #1 this weekend. It's actually tracking ahead of Alice Through the Looking Glass. And it's tracking anywhere between 82 to 100 million. Now, I actually have a couple of box office numbers here. Days of Future Past opened at like just under 91, and then X3 opened at 103. That was the biggest X-Men movie opening until Deadpool, which counts as an X-Men movie, with 132.5 million. So it's just interesting that Deadpool will end up probably doing better than X-Men Apocalypse,
I wonder if there are any people who are going to go see this movie, not really have any understanding of how this works, and expect to see Deadpool in some way.
I know. Well, we should mention that there is, again, Spoilercast, but there is an end credits tag that was not in the press screenings that we saw that basically teases the Essex Corporation and Mr. Sinister as a future villain. And the next movie will be set in the 90s. So at some point, they will reach the year 2016. We will all be dead by then, but someday they will get there. Joshua's like, I'm not going to be.
Joshua and I are going to be fine.
What I was gonna say, just real quick, they've used X-Men they've used post-credit sequences to set up not just X-Men movies, but Wolverine movies. Like the Wolverine set up Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if
that
maybe,
still doesn't make sense either.
let's not go. Let's not think about the timeline.
Rabbit
It's
hole,
the last
rabbit
thing you
hole.
want to do. But I think that might be setting up Wolverine 3 because he took some of Wolverine's blood in the end, and some other vials in there too. So I'm wondering if he's going to use that to create a clone who we know as X-23, the female clone of Wolverine.
Oh, that'd
who's
be
got
awesome.
2 claws up here and one in each foot. And then maybe
Ow.
she'll be his nemesis in the 3rd Wolverine movie.
That's going to do it for this week's show. Check us out on multiple platforms, our PS4, Roku, mobile, everything. On Twitter at Joshua Yale, at Terry_Schwartz, at Jim Vavidus. Send us your thoughts at keepingitreal@ign.com. Let us know what you thought of an X-Men Apocalypse. We'll bring you your own feedback. So for all things movies, X-Men, Marvel, DC, otherwise keep it here on IGN.